Good evening and welcome. Good evening. Welcome to the October 20th virtual community meeting for the Wildfire and the Left Hand Fire. My name is Don Sanchez. I'm a Public Information Officer with Rocky Mountain Team Black. The purpose of today's meeting is to provide you with an update on the Cowwood and Left Hand Canyon fires. We'll have 6 speakers tonight. When the speakers are done, we will then open it up for question and answer session. During the meeting, if you're watching live, you can type your questions into the comments section, and we'll get to those afterwards, after the speakers are done. We'll get to as many questions as we can. We will also get to the questions that have been submitted ahead of time, and I want to thank all of those that have already submitted your questions. We'll start tonight with Derek Williams, who is our incident meteorologist with the National Weather Service. We'll then get an update on fire behavior from Boyd Labita, who is our fire behavior analyst with Rocky Mountain Team Black. Then we'll get an update from operations from Josh Schroyer, who is our operations section chief trainee from Rocky Mountain Team Black. Then we'll have an update from Sheriff Joe Pelly, who is a Boulder County Sheriff. And then Angie G., who is a district ranger for the Boulder Ranger District for the Roosevelt National Forest. And then we'll close things out tonight with Troy Hagan, who is our incident commander for Rocky Mountain Team Black. For some statistics tonight, the Cowwood Fire is currently 9,854 acres, and we're at 21% containment. The Left Hand Canyon Fire is 459 acres and 4% containment. And now we'll start with Derek Williams, our incident meteorologist.
Good evening. Derek Williams, incident meteorologist. So the weather pattern that occurred on October 17th largely contributed to the fire growth from west to east with the Cowwood Fire. West winds, downslope winds, or a mountain wave event occurred on that date, and winds gusted up to 50 miles per hour, which drove the fire from west to east. That pattern has been around for the last couple of days. However, there have been some factors that have prevented those stronger winds from surfacing to the lower elevations, which has helped us out quite a bit. We still have very dry conditions with relative humidity getting down to 20% each day. Especially along the higher elevation areas. And what we have coming forward is another period of critical fire weather conditions that is expected tomorrow or Wednesday afternoon. A red flag warning has been issued for this area, and that includes gusty west to southwest winds with gusts 30 miles per hour. And very low relative humidity. Those will combine to create those critical fire weather conditions. As that happens during the late afternoon hours tomorrow, that will continue into the overnight hours. So expect red flag conditions beginning noon on Wednesday and lasting through 8 a.m. on Thursday. Once we get through that period, the weather changes once again, especially Thursday morning. Thursday morning, there is a strong cold front that will move through northeast Colorado and move over the fire area. In fact, our high temperatures will be reached Thursday morning in the 50s, and then from then, temperatures will drop, relative humidity will rise, and winds will diminish, especially Thursday night into Friday. And as we go into Friday, Friday's kind of a quiet day. Wind-wise, we have much higher relative humidity with highs in the 30s, so almost a 25-degree drop from tomorrow's highs in the 60s. So quite a weather change coming up. And as we get into Saturday and Sunday, we have another strong storm system moving in, which will give us an opportunity, a good opportunity for accumulating snowfall, not only in the mountains, but here in the Boulder area and the Plains area, with anywhere from 2 to 5 inches as it looks right now We'll keep an eye on that and see how it plays out. But it is looking good for that snow over the weekend time frame. And as we go into the long term, it does warm up next week with dry conditions settling back in. With that, that's all I have. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Boyd Levita. I'm Fire Behavior Analyst for Team Black. Just wanted to give a little bit of the backstory on how we got to such serious fire environment conditions that we're experiencing right now. So, thinking about back earlier this year, earlier in 2020, we came through the winter with a fairly normal precipitation system. We had relatively good snowpack. We had decent spring precipitation. And then when we got to summer, we normally get summer monsoonal rains. You hear it as a chance of afternoon thunder showers on that forecast, and that just did not develop this year. It was replaced with very hot weather. We had high pressure sit over us beginning in late July, and that just started to dry out fuel. So we didn't really notice that. It's not an obvious thing when that's happening. And yet, just under that heat and that very dry air, that started to dry out the fuels. And the indices that we use to measure the dryness, we're reading some record levels of that. So just an exceptionally dry fuels that we have. And that's not just here in Boulder County. That has been largely all over the West, but especially here in the Central Rockies. We've seen some fire behavior and some fire growth on fires not terribly far from us that's really been exceptional. The largest, one of the historic fire we look at for Colorado is the Hayman Fire in 2002. 137,000 acres was a benchmark for some time. It was exceeded in acreage this year by the Pine Gulch Fire in earlier this summer. Has been exceeded again by the Cameron Peak Fire, which is just a few miles from here and is not contained yet. That one's still growing. There's a fire just north of that, the Mullen Fire, that is 150,000 acres plus. So we are seeing some exceptional fire growth and fire behavior this year. It is different what's happening this year. In fact, the smoke we saw today that rolled into town in Boulder was not from our fire. It was from a fire in Middle Park called East Troublesome that just rolled over the Continental Divide and right down into town. So being impacted by multiple fires. One thing I'd like to point out about all those fires, including Calwood, is the way it moved and what checked it up and what made it stop. So of course the shape of it reflects the direction the wind was blowing. So it's got that shape. It started on this end, the wind drove it downhill, and largely what has held it up and where it did stop was it got out of the forested fuels. Got to the prairie, got to Highway 36, ran out of fuel in essence. That is a mark we've seen on all of these large fires, including Cameron Peak, that started way up at the Continental Divide and has made multiple runs down there. So fire is just advancing to the downwind edge of the fuel type. Just a signature of what's going on. So the duration of time that we've been under this hot and dry condition, we of course experience multiple wind events like Derek described. We get these downsloping winds. That's not uncommon for the Northern Front Range. We get those downslope winds, and those are now affecting some of these fires we have on our landscape. So these fires occurred, new starts get big fast, have dangerously fast fire spread. So just the setup, just wanted to describe that it's really serious fire conditions we're experiencing right now. Let me do a little description of these two fires that we're working on here. So Calwood Fire, of course, started up near the education center there. Has got that shape on Saturday. That the bulk of that acreage was done in just a few hours on Saturday afternoon, under these dry fuel conditions and the high winds. So really remarkable fire behavior. And then the following day, on Sunday, the left-hand fire started. It's at a higher elevation, but it has that same shape of those strong west winds pushing it down towards the east, again downhill, that downsloping wind. Yet, one of the things that checked that up, if you remember Sunday, we had cool cloud cover weather down here in the valley, and that banked up on the mountains here, and yet that fire was above that, and as it advanced to the east, it encountered that inversion layer, and that was one of the things that helped slow that up. In addition to lots of very good suppression work that was done at that time. So those are just kind of the sequence of things that have happened under these exceptional dry fuel conditions. So we're gonna unfortunately have more of that tomorrow. This red flag warning is just the latest of these wind events that we're gonna experience and go through. So westerly winds switching around a little bit to the southwest. One good thing about the Calwood fire is largely the east side is already contained. It's not really got any opportunity to move on that. So wind that's pushing against this side of it is largely pushing back into what's already burned. That's a good thing. The risk that we face though is fire. It doesn't take a very big area for it to get established and get access to new fuels and take off and move again. So places along the perimeter, our firefighters are going to be watching closely and trying to catch when that happens. So we have to expect that and be ready for that. And the same would be true for the left-hand fire. Strong west wind, switch around to the southwest. We're just going to be having to monitor that closely and be in good position to do that. So we're doing our best, but we're paying close attention to this fire environment we're in, and just trying to keep everybody safe and give good information and just help people make good decisions about how they're going to respond to it. Thanks.
Good evening, Josh Schroyer, Planning Ops Trainee. I'll just go over a quick kind of what's happened today and kind of what we're looking at tomorrow. So you've already heard the shape of the fires because of the wind we've been dealing with, and we've been in here on the heel of the fire. We've got good containment with some direct hand line right here. The fire up along here has hit that ridge and it's slopped over, and it's in that really steep country. It's taking its time kind of backing down because it doesn't have that alignment, and it's kind of working against the wind and terrain. So it's kind of really slow right here. There's still some heat, so we're monitoring that with fire crews both up on top, down on the road, and trying to make sure if it does get out or spot, we can get on it quick. And so lots of monitoring through here. Same thing, it's kind of backing down towards the road here. We get out here, we've had some good success with, again, going direct, and I'm just going to kind of bump over here to this part. Looking real good with some direct hand line. Getting through here, we've had some retardant that was dropped early. That's helped, and that gives our firefighters on the ground a chance to get in and work it a little quicker. Slows it down, takes some heat out. And so all of this area is looking real good. We've hit some of that fuel transition that we've talked about, those lighter fuels. And so really good progress here. And we're going to continue to do that based on the wind event that we're expecting. So we're going to have firefighters out here monitoring this, improving the line that they put in so far, and keeping an eye out just for that wind when it comes through. As previously mentioned, the east side of the fire is looking really good. Got down in that grass, that fuel transition, we lost a lot of heat. Firefighters have done an excellent job in there of taking care of any remaining hot spots that would be a threat to this line. So that's why you see the different color here. Working up around the subdivision here, again, looking real good. There's still some pockets of heat that we don't want to lose sight of, and so we're working those diligently, especially anticipating the wind event coming. And we're just going to continue working that line from east to west. At this point, I'm going to bump back over, and we're going to work from the heel back. So more good hand line is coming through here. We're tying in some roads, trying to connect the dots with some hand line between roads and fuel breaks, fuel transitions, and working around the structures that we have at risk back here. Scouting out opportunities for where we can get in here and try to work as direct as possible, as safely as possible, and looking at getting some heavy equipment in here to help connect the dots between the two. Again, the activity that you saw early this morning was down in this part of the fire on the south side. It's looking really good here. It's coming down off that ridge towards the drainage, towards those lighter fuels where we can pick it up. And again, we've had aircraft helping with the firefighters on the ground to keep that in check and buy us that time so we can get our crews in there. Moving down to the left-hand fire, we've got good line between the roads, the dozer lines, and the hand lines all around this fire. Now, it doesn't mean that it's out. We have to improve that line. There's still heat in here that we have to monitor. There's places where the fire is still backing down to the road, and so we've got to watch that to make sure we don't get rollout or spots across the road there. But this is looking really good. We're not out of the dark, but another day or two, and we're going to feel great about this. We've got lots of crews, engines, hand crews, and equipment down here that have done an excellent job of keeping this thing as small as it is. We know the wind event's coming. We are anticipating what that might do, and we're monitoring and ready to respond tomorrow if needed.
Good evening, my name is Joe Pelley, I'm the Boulder County Sheriff. And, first of all, the first thing I want to say is to those of you who lost homes, you're in my thoughts and prayers and have our condolences. We're sorry for your loss. I want to give you an update on damage assessment as we know it so far. On the Calwood fire, no additional structures are reported to be lost or damaged from the original 26 that we released. Investigators still can't access the westernmost portion of that fire due to ongoing fire operations and heat. In the left-hand canyon fire, we have done a hasty assessment using the assessor's office information about known residential structures and permitted structures, and there are none in the area that we know of. There may have been the loss of some non-permitted structures, outbuildings or sheds. We're going to have to double check on that once the heat's gone. On the investigation status, the Calwood fire, investigators have narrowed down the point of origin to approximately a half an acre, and we are continuing to investigate people that were in the area and try to locate witnesses. On the left-hand canyon fire, investigators have located the point of origin of the fire, and the investigation is continuing to determine the cause. So we're making tremendous progress on the investigations. As far as missing and unaccounted for people, there were a total of 12 reports of unaccounted for people. We've accounted for 6 of those. 6 remain open, but they were not people who were known to be or live or within the burn area. These are people whose relatives are calling, friends are calling and saying, hey, I haven't seen Joe, haven't heard from him in months. Is he here? You know, so we're trying to run those down. We haven't located any casualties. As far as road closures, we have reopened Sunshine Canyon at Mount Sanitas up to 4-Man Road. It's still closed at 4-Man, and the closures at 4 Mile and Logan have been completely lifted. Most of the questions we're getting have to do with evacuations and the evacuation plan and the reentry plan and when can I go home. And you know, you and I have been through this a number of times together, and I understand the angst. I understand the anxiousness. I also understand completely that we have cold weather coming in, and a lot of your homes don't have utilities. They don't have heat. You're worried about pipes freezing and that kind of thing. We are making plans. I got a crew working on this tonight. They're going to be working through the night. They're going to be working through the day on placarding and a reentry plan. As it's been in the past, it'll be staged and staggered. It'll go, it'll go in order of where it's safe and where we can open it to and what the best points are, but it will be happening. Obviously, tomorrow's weather, the red flag warning, and a lot of active fire still in these fire zones is not going to be conducive to reentry. What we are working on is an opportunity to try to escort people into their homes that are outside of the actual fire zone, but perhaps in an evacuated area, like up here in the Bar K area, and that kind of thing, to see if we can get you into your house long enough to shut your water off, open the valves on your faucets, do some quick things to try to make sure your house is okay through 20-degree temperatures over the weekend. And then our hope, obviously, is in the weather. Our hope and our prayers are in the weather. We're optimistic that we're going to have a nice, cold, wet weekend and really put a stomp on this thing and be able to get people back into their houses where they belong. So that's the best I can do for you right now. We are putting together a reentry plan tomorrow with the red flag weather, with high winds, and with the amount of heat we still have. It's probably not a good day for many of you to reenter. There may be a few places unaffected by the fire, outside the fire zone, that we will be able to do some limited reopening. And our team of sheriff's commanders are going to be working with fire operations to make those determinations. And when they're made, that information will be posted on the Boulder Office of Emergency Management website, and then redistributed on the sheriff's website and that kind of thing. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Angie G. I'm the district ranger for the Boulder Ranger District on the Roosevelt National Forest. Like the sheriff, I too would like to express my condolences for those of you that lost homes. We're sincerely sorry for your loss. I'm here tonight to talk to you about the forest closure that we announced earlier today on the Arapahoe and Roosevelt National Forest. Due to the unprecedented and historic fire conditions that we are experiencing, we are temporarily closing National Forest System lands in Clear Creek County, a small portion of Jefferson County, Boulder County, Gilpin County, and Larimer County. That forest order was signed today. It goes into effect at midnight tonight. Law enforcement and forest personnel have been out on the forest today contacting people who are currently out there to let them know of the closure. It will take some time to get everything posted, but we're hoping to get the word out far and wide virtually that the forest is closed effective at midnight tonight. So I also just want to talk a little bit about why we are closing the forest, what led us to this decision, and how it affects you. So the counties affected by the forest closure are experiencing exceptional drought and unseasonable weather conditions. Fire danger is still very high on the forest. And over the last few days, the explosive fire growth that we have seen on Cameron Peak, on Calwood, and on left-hand fires led us to the decision to close the forest. We really hope that it will be short duration. We take this kind of thing really seriously. We don't like to restrict access to the forest. But we strongly felt that we needed to do this to allow firefighters to focus on the mission, to work on our existing fires, and to keep people out of harm's way. So let's talk a little bit about what that means to you. With this forest closure, it is closed to the general public for any kind of recreational purposes, other kinds of special uses, or any kind of utilization of the national purpose. It is closed. Our order does not close state and county roads. However, state and county roads are, they're subject to the restrictions that state and counties have put in place for those roads. So there are some closures in the fire area. Our forest order does close exclusive Forest Service roads, with the exception of those roads that lead to private property. And residents who need to access their private property, they can reach out to us to get an exemption to get in, to do critical maintenance, winterization, with the weather coming in. You can reach out to us and we will work with you to give you an exemption to get in and do that. Hunting is also impacted. We have been working really closely with CPW, and CPW, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, is reaching out directly to license holders in the area affected by the closure. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is just that we are really encouraging local residents and visitors to take this closure and the evacuations seriously. We will evaluate the closure on a daily basis. Again, we hope it's short duration, but our intent is to keep it in place until conditions approve, and we are confident that the risk of new fire starts is decreasing. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Troy Hagan, Instant Manager. IC Team Black. I just want to talk a little bit about the information you've heard tonight. It's a lot of good stuff. There's been a lot of activity going on around here the past couple days, and frankly, all summer. You've been surrounded by fires, and unfortunately, one came into these two neighborhoods in this county. So, but the work that the sheriff's office did was just amazing on these evacuations. The Calwood fire started and ran so fast. Without their pre-planning, we'd probably be having some different discussions tonight. So it's an amazing work by those folks. And then the older IMT type 3 team that came in before us came in and helped corral and manage some of these resources and get them in alignment with goals of protecting structures and people. So we just come in behind them with a little more horsepower and a little different organizational level to help build on the work that they did, which was, again, amazing work. We're basically working off the plans that they developed. We just have a few more folks and, like I said, a different organizational level. So I won't take up too much of your time. No one ever wants to have an IMT to come into their area, but we're happy that we can come in and assist you folks. It's late in the year, got a lot of weary firefighters out there, but we're all in it for the good fight. And we're gonna be here until we can wrap this thing up. And we will have challenges ahead, like they said with the red flag warnings, but we're up to the challenge and we're gonna be here as long as we're needed. So thanks everyone, and questions will be coming through the web. Thanks.
Thank you, Troy. So we're gonna go ahead and get into the question and answer session, and our first question is gonna be for Sheriff Joe Kelly. So this is gonna be about evacuation warnings, and it's gonna be two-part. The first one, the town of Lyons has been in a state of high alert for days. It's stressful. Can you take some time to discuss the town's status, what could trigger an evacuation? We'd rather know what we're dealing with than living in uncertainty. And then the second piece is, again, about evacuations and what will happen if an evacuation order is necessary, including an overnight change in those evacuations.
Okay, so here's our concern with the town of Lyons. As fire operations indicated, the difficulty is in this area, which is very steep and has really steep rocky cliffs and has vegetation down in those fingers, and the fire's hanging up in there in places, and you can't dig a fire line on a cliff, and you can't dig a fire line in rocks. and that kind of thing. And there's only so much you can do with retardant and that kind of thing. So they're watching this very carefully from up above, as they said, and down below, making sure they don't get a spot. But our concern is with high winds, and our concern is heat in any one of those fingers getting stirred up and then getting blown down onto this area in the St. Vrain above the town of Lyons, which could then start a fire towards the town. The fire folks have done an amazing job of pre-staging resources, monitoring this. Hotshots have been in there digging out what they can. They've been using aircraft, helicopters, and slurry and retardant, that kind of thing, to do the best they can. But our concern is the event we're going to have tomorrow with the wind. And I think if we get through that, we're going to be in pretty good shape after that in regards to the town. But that's our concern right now. And until our fire folks tell us that that's buttoned up and it's not hot and they're no longer a risk, we're going to keep Lyons in a state of alert. If in the middle of the night or in the middle of the day, a wind event stirs a fire and we get any concern about the town of Lyons, we will launch an evacuation order using 911, reverse 911 polygons, sending messages to cell phones, and we will also send a small army of deputies screaming into your town, trying to knock on your door, get your attention, using their red lights and siren, telling everybody they need to evacuate. Personally, I don't think that's highly likely, but until this is cold and wet, we have to be careful and we have to be alert and on guard, and that's what I'm asking you guys to do as well, in Lyons.
Thank you, Sheriff. I have another question here, and it's again with evacuations. Is it necessary to register with Everbridge to receive emergency notifications, or is allowing government notifications on your device good enough?
I would register with Everbridge because then you're going to get alerts from our communications center and not the National Weather Service or a third-party provider, which may come later and may be filtered.
Okay, thank you. And then if there are changes in, we had a couple questions about Spring Gulch and Pinewood Springs, as well as Barge 7. If those evacuations were to change, how are those folks going to be notified? Are those still currently in place, and how are they going to get notified if they change?
So can you repeat the areas again?
Spring Gulch, Barge 7, and Pinewood Springs.
So some of those areas are in Larimer County, and the way this works, we have polygons pre-drawn in our CAD systems, which launch evacuations in certain areas, regardless of what county it's in. So, for instance, Lyons Fire District covers many parts of residential areas that are outside of Boulder County. They're in Larimer County, but our two communication centers are tied together. We share that information. We're able to link up, and we're able to launch simultaneous evacuation orders from Fort Collins, Larimer County Dispatch, and Boulder County Dispatch.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's good. Our next question is going to be for operations. We've had several questions about containment lines. What exactly are containment lines? How are they constructed? And what does it mean when you say go direct?
Okay, good question. Containment lines could be natural, such as the river. Most of the time, in the case of firefighting, they're man-made. We could be out digging a line in the dirt to remove the fuel. When the fire gets to that spot with no fuel, it goes out. That's the basic, simple. But we also use other things like roads. Those are man-made. We can use that to either burn out the fuel in front of the main fire to widen our black. So that would help strengthen our containment line. We can do that in other areas, maybe to protect structures. And the idea is just to remove the fuel so the fire cannot burn anymore. When we talk about going direct, that means we want to get as close to the active fire edge as possible, as safely as we can, because when we can do that, the fire intensity is generally a little lower, and then we can ensure a better chance of no spots with the fire getting across. Sometimes the fire activity or the terrain doesn't allow for that, so we have to go indirect. And that might be putting the dozer line out way in front of the fire and then doing what we have to there or utilizing a road. But in this instance, a lot of this fire has been conducive to going direct, getting as close as we can, and that gives us the best chance of success for putting this fire out.
Thank you, and to build on that, we had a question. I know we've said a few times that the fire has ran out of fuel. What does that mean when you say the fire has ran out of fuel?
Okay, that's a good one too. When we're burning in the timber and the trees, so that's a heavy fuel. The trees can burn clear at the top because the needles and the pitch in the tree generates a lot of heat. It could be dead trees that have fallen down. Again, that's heavy fuel. We talk about the fuel transitions where we get out of the timber and down into the grass or sage, and we consider those light fuels. They burn up fairly quickly. They don't hold the heat for as long as the other fuels. And so that's where we want to take advantage of that. It runs into the really light fuels, it runs into a road. That's kind of what we're talking about when we say we've run out of fuel. But really we've hit that fuel transition to something that we can manage a lot better.
Thank you for that explanation. We got one more question for you right now. It's going to get a little detailed here. Can you give a detailed update on Lions Park Estates area as a whole? All the details they're looking for are some of the dozer line that's been installed, any structure preparation, and there is some question on evac status, which if you don't know that, we can get that from the sheriff. And is there a possibility of a firing operation above Highway 7?
That's a lot of stuff there.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So again, I'm just going to kind of go back and hopefully this will answer the question for you. We've got a lot of good work going on down here. We're connecting dots with roads. We're going direct like we just talked about with the idea that we can hold this fire here. We don't know what this wind event's going to bring. And like the sheriff said, we have to be prepared for what if this does get away from us and take off. We're going to do everything we can safely do to try to put the fire breaks, the control lines between the fire and the structures. But we don't want to get anybody hurt, of course. And so as we look, as we move north from the fire edge, we're looking at all the options that we've got to connect roads, connect maybe a rock outcrop with the road, so we're connecting the dots. So specifically where dozer lines are, I don't have that right now. And that'll be something that might be we deal with later. But we're doing everything we can to just try to keep it as far away as possible, but anticipating if it does get up and move, we're ready to come in there and do what we can for that immediate structure protection around it. Did that get all the questions?
I believe so. Thank you for that. And then if there's additional work in that area, we'll make sure that you address those in the morning updates. Thank you. So our next question is going to be for our incident meteorologist. Please explain wind directions. If you list the wind is west, southwest, is that from the west or towards the west?
So when we talk about wind direction, that is from, when we say west-southwest, that's from the west-southwest. So when we say west wind, it's from the west and blows to the east. So west wind, west to east, just like this. I think you had another question.
I do. So the next question is, what does red flag warning mean?
Okay, red flag warning is used primarily by land management agencies, although in the recent years the public has been kind of catching on to that term. Basically, it tells land management agencies and fire agencies that there is a potential for critical fire weather conditions. That includes gusty winds of 25 miles per hour or more for 3 or more hours, usually during the daytime. And then also combined with very low relative humidity, so very dry atmosphere. So when you get those gusty winds and dry conditions, that really aids the spread of the fire. So that's what we're going to deal with tomorrow and tomorrow night into Thursday morning.
Okay, thank you. So our next question is going to go to our fire behavior analyst. So the question is, please explain what southwest winds mean for fire growth on the northeast side of the fire.
Yes, so it's all gonna be a matter of fuel that's available out ahead of that fire. So of course, the heat is transferred when the wind is blowing southwest on that, any spot of fire, of course, that heat is gonna be pushed in that northeast direction. So, of course, it will want to, if it can find available fuel, it will move it that direction. What's the good situation about what we have here for a southwest wind on this fire is that crews have been able to go direct, and that direct line means that they've gone right up to the edge of the fire and removed that nearby available fuel from the heat that's there. So even if when that wind impacts that heat that's burning there, there's a separation of non-burnable fuel, dirt, and between that what is burning and where the heat is and where the available fuel is. So being able to go direct is a good asset in this situation.
Excellent, thank you, Boyd. And I have one more question here for you. Is it difficult for a fire to backtrack or reburn an already burned area? And if maybe you can discuss some interior smokes that we may see from down here in town in Boulder.
Yes, there is such a thing as reburn. However, it's unlikely that we are going to have that situation in this fire. So a reburn would occur, for example, in a forest that, like Gamble Oak. So the great example, not great, but the classic example for Colorado would be the South Canyon Fire. Gamble Oak on the west slope. That fire burned in the leaf litter on the floor of the forest and dried out all the canopy, which Gamble Oak forest is only probably up to 20 feet tall, so it dried that out. Then fire was able to get into that dense canopy in advance. Our situation is this Ponderosa Pine woodland on the Calwood fire. Fire is, for much of the area, has burned through on the surface. Not necessarily all of it has burned the canopy. Yet that canopy, those remaining trees are widely spaced enough that there's just not enough loading, not enough density that we'd expect fire to move through. That'd be very unlikely to see that kind of a reburn on the Calwood fire. There was a second part to that question, wasn't there?
Talking about interior smokes that
yeah.
people may see
Yes,
from
yes.
down in town.
So, just like the fuel out in the forest, just like you see when you hike, it's not completely uniform. There's pockets of some grass, there's pockets of some brush, there's groups of trees, and as fire moves through and accesses those things, it burns them at different rates, and in some cases doesn't even burn some places. So it may appear to be hopping around. In other cases, enough heat and intensity underneath the tree causes the entire tree to burn out. We would call that a torching tree, and it would throw embers out ahead of the fire and start a new fire, spot fire, and that would leave a gap of burned fuel with the gap would be unburned fuel between two burned areas. So what happens in the time after we get this big push, like this big advance, there's going to be a considerable number of these pockets of unburned fuel. And so the days after that main fire moves through, those things will pull together. So all those edges of fire are going to continue to crawl and creep towards each other, and they'll pull together. And we've seen a lot of that. That's a very common thing to see on these fires. Firefighters are great about watching that and making sure that that kind of activity on the interior does not threaten it getting outside and continuing to advance the extent of the fire.
Thank you, Boyd. So our next question is going to be for the U.S. Forest Service. So this is in regards to the forest closure. Are you saying that people in the national forest will be evicted under the forest order?
Great question, and I apologize if that wasn't clear. So if your primary residence is amongst the national forest and you are not in an evacuation zone, you will not be evicted from your home. And if your only access to your private property is a Forest Service road, we will work with you to give you an exemption to use that road to get to your private residence. I think where maybe the question came in, I was giving an example earlier of a secondary residence, a recreation residence, something like that, where you are not in it permanently but have a need to go in for critical maintenance or winterization. You can contact us and we can discuss the possibility of an exemption if you need to get in there. So I hope that helps clarify that question.
Thank you, Angie. The next question is going to be for Sheriff Kelly. How can people learn more about limited entry for residents?
Once a plan is developed, we'll have a placarding system in place that'll all be posted on the website of the Boulder Office of Emergency Management. And then our county folks and sheriff's office media folks will be broadcasting that information on our websites as well.
Thank you. Does the emergency alert, this is regarding Everbridge, does it come in Spanish?
Everbridge does not launch in Spanish. Part of the next generation 911 work we're working on is to get those canned messages in both English and Spanish.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is going to be for operations. The left-hand canyon fire appears to have crossed over left-hand canyon road and the creek in one area. Is this development an issue of concern?
It's a great question. So you're obviously looking and paying attention, but what I do want to clarify is we have lots of technologies out there available to us, and they're not always 100% accurate. And I think what happened there, the IR flight that was showing that, sometimes a column can lean over, sometimes there's just an offset with the GPS. There's all sorts of little things that can happen. And it did show something that looked like it was across the road, but our guys on the ground got out there and ground truthed it and confirms that it is not across the road. So we're not concerned about it across the road.
Okay, thank you. And one clarification, can you explain what IR flight is?
Yeah, the infrared, they usually fly it at night so that they can see the heat signatures. There's a bunch of different ways to do that with the plane, doing it at night, satellite detection, but infrared is what IR stands for.
Thank you. Okay, our next question is going to go back to our fire behavior analyst. How likely is the potential snow going to help containment efforts this weekend? And will it be enough to contain the fire?
So, great question. A definite asset to it. So the snow, that kind of system brings a couple of really good things to moderate the fire environment that I described earlier that is so volatile and is so serious. Brings moisture, which we really need to start rebuilding in. We're in a serious drought condition. We need lots of moisture. We need a number of snows. So the cold as well as the moisture will definitely stop the fire movement for a number of days. It will give firefighters an opportunity, since they can go direct and go right up on the edge of the fire, to get right in there where they can and contain it and then mop up that edge, and that will secure that part of the fire. So great asset, but will the snow do it by itself is probably a no. In fact, we have an experience with this not so very far away. The Cameron Peak Fire back on Labor Day, if you recall, had 3 days of astounding fire spread that was followed by a very powerful cold front that dumped as much as a foot of snow on the fire. Yet only not even 10 days later, of course, the high pressure weather returned, and that fire became active again because it was able to just hide out under those dense canopy fuels and re-emerge there. So we do have a different situation here, but I think we still need to have the firefighter work and the suppression work done to be fully contained on the fire.
Thank you. Thank you, Boyd. So our next question is going to be for the sheriff. We've had some questions about arson, and we know that there's been some rumors. The residents would like to know if they need to worry about an arsonist in the area.
Yeah, I'm glad they asked that question because I've been watching this on social media grow as well. Sometimes when we say we think something's human caused, people jump to assumptions. There's absolutely no evidence to believe that there's an arsonist setting fires. We believe we may have some human caused fires. We are making great progress on determining what happened. I expect to have some answers soon, but I don't want you to worry about an arsonist or someone intentionally setting fires. There's no evidence of that.
Thank you, Sheriff. Next question, should residents be concerned about security of evacuated properties?
So our deputies have been doing a great job with security, roadblocks, roving neighborhoods, and I have to also give a great thanks to the Boulder Police Department, the Colorado State Patrol, the Erie Police Department, the Lafayette Police Department, the Louisville Police Department, the Longmont Police Department, all of our police agencies in Boulder County. They've all sent cops. They're working with us. They're manning shifts overnight. Every checkpoint is staffed, and then there are roving deputies working those subdivisions and in those subdivisions. I think you're probably far more secure than any other time.
Thank you. I do have one additional question for you. What are the status of structures on Spring Gulch Road?
I'm not aware of any issues with Spring Gulch Road. I'm not aware of any loss or threat.
Okay, thank you. So I think the next question we can go with the U.S. Forest Service. Okay, so this question is in regards to future efforts to educate Coloradans and those who visit about fire danger. Are any talks about how we can creatively spread more knowledge and awareness to prevent human-caused fires in the future?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. And yes, we do have those conversations regularly. They are ongoing now, and we have been having those conversations for several years. We are working closely with our partners and cooperating agencies. New local kind of place-based collaboratives are sort of standing themselves up. The St. Vrain Forest Health Partnership is an example of one. The Boulder County Forest Collaborative is an example of another. We're working with all these folks, fire protection districts, watershed coalitions, to develop new and innovative ways to better tell our story, to try to get the word out there, and help local residents and newcomers to Colorado understand the fire dangers that are present in the national forests. And some of the things that they do, frankly, that can cause a wildfire, like unattended campfires, or just burning trash, or dumping hot ashes on the forest, or just an example of things. We're trying to get that word out to really help people understand the risks that are present and what they can do to help prevent the start of new fires.
Okay, thank you. I do have an additional question for you. Will the closure be signed on roads and forest entry points to keep people out of the closure? And will there be penalties for breaking the closure?
Yes, so we will be posting signs and getting that up. We'll be working with law enforcement agencies to do that. We're identifying critical access points to post that. We're also looking at ways where we can use highway billboards to get the word out on that, and it's gonna take a little bit of time because it's a large area under forest closure, but we are working on that. I am gonna pull up my notes here so I can cite the penalty correctly, for the order. Sorry, give me 1 second here. The consequences of ignoring this closure, violating stage 3 fire restrictions, which is the forced closure, or going into closed areas carries a mandatory appearance in federal court and is punishable by a fine up to $5,000 for an individual or $10,000 for an organization. And/or it could lead to imprisonment for up to 6 months. So it's pretty steep, and again, we are just urging residents and visitors to seriously follow this forest closure and the evacuations that are out there.
Thank you, Angie. So we have a couple more questions for the sheriff. Can you give us an update on Jamestown?
Jamestown is currently under voluntary evacuation or a warning notice. The reason for that is the decision was made regarding the topography, the fuels, and the ability to evacuate the town from 2 different directions, should we ever need to do that. And so the decision was made not to make it mandatory, but to make it voluntary, and to put people on notice that they may be evacuated.
Okay, second question for you. Do we know when power will be restored to the areas that are experiencing a power outage?
So I know XL Energy has crews here. They have them staged. They've got poles, they've got people, they've got trucks. They're ready to go. I think right now, I would guess we're gonna have to get through this red flag day tomorrow, and then we're gonna start seeing progress. And I would guess we'll start seeing progress on the lower end of the fire, the east end of the fire first. That's where it's gonna be the coolest and the safest, and probably the fastest to restore power. And then as we go further west and things get more complicated, that'll probably be the last thing to go on. So, but as to days or weeks, you know, the fires we've had before, my experience before, was that once they got the green light and once it was safe, power was restored fairly quickly in a matter of a few days.
Okay, great, thank you. Those are all the questions we have for today. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in today and watching the live community meeting. I'd also like to thank all of you who put your comments into the comment section, asked questions beforehand. We tried to get to all the questions that we could today. Some of the questions that have been asked, we will get to those later this evening or tomorrow when we can track down those answers, but we will get back to those folks that we did not get to today. One thing I would like to close with is we're getting a lot of people asking about best way to show appreciation, volunteering, and donations. The community, the 2 days that our team has been here, the community is amazing here. You guys have a fantastic community, very giving community. If you guys are interested in donating and volunteering, you can go to boulderoem.com. Again, that's boulderoem.com, and you can sign up there to do volunteer work and the interest that you have in donations. And that is all I have today. Thank you and have a good evening.